This your wife? She looks pathetic.
You used to be sexy. Now you just eat and sleep. You know what's wild? The man who said those words to me while I was 8 months pregnant with his child, the same man who mimicked my pregnancy waddle while his mistress laughed, that same man stood on my doorstep 2 years later, soaking wet and begging me to let him in. But let me take you back to the beginning, because honey, this story taught me that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming so unbothered that you don't even recognize the person you used to cry over. See, I used to be the type of woman who believed love was supposed to conquer everything. I believed that if you stood by your man through thick and thin, he'd never leave you standing alone. I believed pregnancy was supposed to be this sacred time when your husband would hold you closer, not push you further away. Girl, let me tell you, I learned some hard lessons. My story isn't just about a cheating husband or a dramatic comeback. It's about every woman who's ever been told her body wasn't good enough. Every woman who's been abandoned when she was most vulnerable. Every woman who's had to choose between begging for scraps or building her own table. But it's also about something more powerful. It's about the woman who rises from the ashes and realizes she was never the problem. It's a wake-up call to anyone settling for less than they deserve, and a reminder that sometimes people don't leave because you're not enough. They leave because they can't handle how much you are. Before we dive in, do me a quick favor, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know who's riding with me on this journey. I met Jason Miller when I was 24, working as a receptionist at a real estate firm, dreaming of one day becoming an interior designer but too afraid to take the leap. He was 28, already a successful realtor with that kind of swagger that made you feel chosen. Tall, sharp suits, a smile that could close any deal. And he chose me. Our first year together felt like something out of a movie. He'd surprise me with flowers on random Tuesdays, take me to restaurants I couldn't pronounce the names of, tell me I was beautiful in a way that made me actually believe it. When he proposed after 2 years, I cried so hard I couldn't even say yes. I just nodded while mascara ran down my face. We got married on a spring afternoon with cherry blossoms everywhere, and for the first 3 years, we were happy. Or at least I thought we were. Jason was building his career, closing bigger deals, making a name for himself. I supported him through every late night, every stressful negotiation, every moment he doubted himself. I was his cheerleader, his soft place to land. And then I got pregnant. At first, he seemed excited. He rubbed my belly, talked about baby names, even started looking at cribs online. But somewhere around month 4, when my body really started changing, something shifted. The compliments stopped. The touches became fewer. He started working later and later. By month 7, I could feel him slipping away. But I didn't know about her yet. I didn't know that 3 months earlier, at the Miami Luxury Real Estate Gala, Jason had met the woman who would become the wrecking ball that destroyed everything I thought was solid. Her name was Vanessa Rodriguez. Jason told me he had to attend the gala for networking, major investors, potential clients, the kind of event that could take his career to the next level. I was 6 months pregnant, exhausted, and honestly relieved I didn't have to squeeze into a formal dress and pretend to be interested in conversations about market trends and closing ratios. "You sure you don't mind?" he'd asked, adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. "Go," I'd said, waving him off from the couch where I sat with swollen ankles elevated. "Make those connections. I'll be right here with my ice cream and Netflix." He kissed my forehead, something that felt more like obligation than affection, and walked out. What I didn't know was that Vanessa had been circling him all night. She was 26, a real estate photographer who worked freelance for luxury listings. Long, dark hair, curves in all the right places, the kind of confidence that comes from knowing men turn their heads when you walk by. She wore a red dress that night. Of course it was red. The kind that made every other woman in the room feel underdressed or overdressed, never just right. Jason told me later, during one of our many arguments, how it happened. She approached him at the bar, complimented his recent sale of a waterfront property, asked intelligent questions about his strategies. She made him feel seen, not as a husband, not as a soon-to-be father, but as a man, a successful, powerful, desirable man. She got me, he'd said, like that was supposed to excuse everything. They exchanged numbers that night, just for professional networking, he claimed. But the text started innocent and escalated fast. Compliments about his business acumen turned into flirtation. Questions about property listings turned into personal questions. How's your evening? Turned into thinking about you. And Jason? He ate it up. Because at home, I was no longer the woman who made him feel like a king. I was the woman who asked him to rub my feet, who complained about heartburn, who fell asleep at 8 p.m. I was growing life, but in his eyes, I was just growing. Vanessa didn't ask him for anything. She just gave attention, admiration, the kind of excitement that made him feel 25 again instead of pushing 30 with a mortgage and a baby on the way. The affair started small, coffee meetings that went too long, working dinners that I never questioned because I trusted him, late-night texts he'd hide by turning his phone face down on the nightstand. I noticed the changes, of course, the way he'd shower as soon as he got home, the new cologne, how he'd snap at me over nothing, like my very presence annoyed him. "You're so sensitive," he'd say when I asked if something was wrong. "It's just work stress." But it wasn't work stress. It was guilt, and guilt, when you're not willing to stop what's causing it, turns into resentment. By month 8 of my pregnancy, Vanessa had him completely under her spell. She'd send him photos, never fully explicit, just suggestive enough to keep him wanting more. She'd talk about how hard he worked, how he deserved someone who appreciated him, how she couldn't understand how any woman wouldn't worship a man like him. And then she'd say things like, "I bet your wife doesn't even see you anymore. She's probably too tired, too focused on the baby." She was planting seeds, and Jason's ego was fertile ground. "You deserve better," she'd whisper during their hotel meetups. "A man like you, stuck with someone who let herself go? It's not fair." And Jason, instead of defending me, the woman who'd stood by him through everything, started agreeing with her. I became the pregnant wife in his mind. Not Monique, not the woman he married, just an obligation, a burden, a reminder of responsibilities he no longer wanted. Vanessa painted herself as his escape, his reward for all his hard work, and she made sure I was painted as the anchor dragging him down. The breaking point came on a night I'll never forget. I was 8 months pregnant, making dinner, when Jason walked through the door with Vanessa on his arm, laughing like they owned the world. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw it. The disgust, the contempt, the complete absence of love. And in that moment I realized he'd already chosen her. He just hadn't told me yet. 3 days after that humiliating night, Jason left me. Not with a conversation, not with an apology, just a note on the kitchen counter that said, "Don't wait up. You did this to yourself." I stood there, 8 months pregnant, reading those words over and over until they blurred. You did this to yourself. Like growing his child was some selfish choice I made alone. Like my body changing to create life was a personal attack against him. I called him 17 times that day. 17. Each call went straight to voicemail. I texted, begged, asked him to just talk to me. Nothing. Radio silence. When I finally tried to reach out to Vanessa, foolishly thinking maybe woman to woman, she'd have some decency, I found out she'd blocked me on everything. My number, my social media. She'd erased me before I even knew I was being replaced. That's when the panic set in. Jason had been the primary breadwinner. My receptionist's salary barely covered groceries and gas. The mortgage, the car payment, the insurance, that was all him. And now, he was just gone. I called his mother, hoping she'd talk sense into him. She sighed like I was bothering her and said, "Jason's going through something. Give him space." Space. Like I was the problem. Like I was suffocating him by existing. I called my own mother next, and she tried to be supportive, but I could hear the disappointment in her voice. The unspoken, "I told you to wait before getting pregnant." She lived in another state, struggling with her own health issues. She couldn't help me even if she wanted to. I was alone. Completely, terrifyingly alone. The first week, I barely ate. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the baby kick, wondering how I was supposed to bring a child into this mess. The nursery we'd started decorating together sat half-finished, a cruel reminder of the life I thought we were building. The bills started piling up. Red envelopes, final notices, threatening phone calls. I tried to explain to the mortgage company that my husband left, that I was pregnant, that I needed time. They didn't care. Payment is due regardless of personal circumstances, ma'am. I applied for assistance, swallowed my pride, and sat in government offices for hours just to be told I made too much, barely, to qualify for help. But I made too little to actually survive. I started selling things. Our wedding china. The designer handbag Jason bought me for our anniversary. My grandmother's earrings. Anything to buy myself time, to keep a roof over my head for just one more month. The hospital visits were the worst. Every appointment, I'd sit in that waiting room surrounded by glowing couples. Husbands with their hands on their wives' bellies. Partners asking the doctors excited questions about delivery plans. And me? Sitting alone, filling out forms with shaking hands, checking single in the marital status box, even though technically I was still married. The nurses would ask, "Is someone coming to pick you up after the ultrasound?" "No," I'd say quietly. "It's just me." They'd give me these pitying looks that made me want to disappear. One night, about 2 weeks after Jason left, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, really looked at myself, swollen face, dark circles under my eyes from crying and not sleeping. My belly huge, stretched, covered in marks that I used to think were beautiful, but now just felt like evidence of my failure. And I saw what Jason saw. I saw someone I didn't recognize, someone who looked tired and broken and used up. I touched my reflection, and the tears started again. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere so deep, you can't stop it even when you try. "You're disgusting," I whispered to myself, echoing his words. "You did this to yourself." I slid down to the bathroom floor and sobbed until I had nothing left. I stayed there for hours, my back against the cold tile, wondering how I'd gotten here, wondering if Jason was right, wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. And then I felt it, a strong kick, then another. My baby girl, the one I'd already named Amara, was moving, reminding me she was there, reminding me this wasn't just about me anymore. I put my hand on my belly and something inside me cracked open, not in a breaking way, in a waking up way. This baby didn't ask for any of this. She didn't deserve to come into the world with a mother who'd given up. And I realized, sitting on that bathroom floor, that I had a choice. I could let Jason's abandonment define me, or I could define myself. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning at 4:37 a.m., Amara Simone Miller came into the world screaming. I labored alone, breathed through contractions alone, held my own hand when I wanted to give up. The nurses were kind, but there's something uniquely painful about delivering your first child with an empty chair next to your bed where your husband should be. But when they placed her on my chest, warm, tiny, perfect, everything changed. She opened her eyes and looked right at me, and I swear I felt my entire soul rearrange itself. This little person, with her full head of dark hair and her tiny fingers gripping mine, she was mine. Not his, not anyone else's. Mine to protect, mine to love, mine to fight for. "I'm your mama," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "And I promise you, baby girl, we're going to be okay. I don't know how yet, but we will." The nurse smiled at me. "She's beautiful." "She's everything," I said. And I meant it. Lying in that hospital bed, exhausted and stitched up and still processing everything that had happened, I made myself a promise. I would not let Jason's rejection be the end of my story. I would not raise my daughter to believe that a man's opinion defined her worth. I would rebuild. Brick by brick, tear by tear, I would create a life so beautiful that his absence wouldn't even leave a shadow. I didn't know how yet. I had no plan, no money, no support system. But I had something more important. I had a reason. And sometimes, that's all you need to start. They don't tell you about the first night home from the hospital when you're a single mother. Nobody warns you about sitting in a dark nursery at 3 a.m., nursing a screaming baby while crying yourself because you're so exhausted you can't remember if you fed her an hour ago or 3 hours ago. Nobody mentions the fear that grips you when you realize there's no one to tag in, no one to take the next shift, no one to tell you you're doing okay. Those first few months were survival mode. I'd sleep in 15-minute increments, eat whatever I could grab with one hand, shower maybe twice a week if I was lucky. My body ached from childbirth, my heart ached from abandonment, and my bank account was screaming louder than my newborn. But somewhere between the diaper changes and the 2 a.m. feeding sessions, something in me refused to stay broken. I'd always loved design, beautiful spaces, the way colors could change a mood, how a well-placed piece of furniture could transform a room. It was the dream I'd shelved when I met Jason, the passion I'd buried under being supportive of his career. One night, while Amara slept in her bassinet next to me, I opened my laptop. My hands shook as I typed into the search bar, "How to become an interior designer with no money." That search changed everything. I started with YouTube. Free tutorials on design software, SketchUp basics, color theory, mood board creation. I'd watch videos with the volume low, one earbud in, taking notes while Amara nursed. When she napped, I'd practice. When she played on her mat, I'd sketch. Every stolen moment became an investment in our future. I taught myself Canva, then Photoshop basics, then actual design programs. My fingers cramped from hours on the laptop. My eyes burned from staring at the screen. But slowly, I started creating things that didn't look terrible. I needed money, though. Fast. The mortgage was 3 months behind, and Jason's lawyer had finally sent divorce papers, no child support offer included, of course. So I started an Etsy shop. Nothing fancy. Custom printable wall art, personalized nursery designs, motivational quotes in pretty fonts. I charged $5, then $10, then $15 as I got better. I'd design while Amara slept, upload listings at midnight, and pray someone would buy. My first sale came at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday. $12. I cried like I'd won the lottery. That $12 became $20, then $50, then $100. Word spread slowly. Friends of friends, someone's cousin, a neighbor who saw my work. I started offering in-person consultations for people who wanted help redesigning a single room but couldn't afford a full interior designer. "Just give me $200 and a weekend," I'd say. "I'll make your living room look like it belongs in a magazine." And I did. I'd shop at thrift stores, home goods, clearance sections. I'd rearrange furniture, add plants, switch out pillows and throws. I worked magic on tight budgets because I understood tight budgets. I was living one. Mrs. Chen from down the street was my first real client. She hired me to redo her daughter's bedroom for $300. I spent 2 weeks planning, shopping, and transforming that space. When I revealed it, her daughter cried happy tears. Mrs. Chen posted before and after photos on Facebook, tagged me, said I was a miracle worker. My phone didn't stop ringing for a week. That's when I started my Instagram account, Monique Designs You. I posted every transformation, every budget hack, every design tip I learned. I showed my process, my struggles, even posted videos of me designing while Amara played in the background. Real-life design, I called it. No perfect staging, just a single mom making magic happen. People connected with that authenticity. Then one video changed everything. I'd transformed a dated kitchen using contact paper, peel and stick tiles, and a $300 budget. I filmed the whole process, sped it up, added music, and posted it thinking maybe my usual few hundred followers would see it. It hit 1 million views in 3 days. My phone exploded. DMs from people wanting consultations, companies offering to sponsor me, interior design firms reaching out. Local news wanted to interview the budget design queen of Miami. I remember sitting on my couch, Amara on my lap, staring at my phone in disbelief. 1 year ago, I'd been crying on a bathroom floor thinking my life was over. Now I was getting offers I'd only dreamed about. But success doesn't heal trauma. It just gives you better problems. I was thriving professionally, but inside, I was still that woman Jason abandoned. Still heard his voice calling me disgusting. Still flinched when I looked in the mirror. So I started therapy. Every Tuesday at 10 a.m., I'd drop Amara at daycare and sit in Dr. Morrison's office, unpacking years of damage. We talked about Jason, about my self-worth, about how I'd tied my value to his approval. "You're not rebuilding," Dr. Morrison said one day. "You're becoming who you always were underneath his shadow." That hit different. Therapy taught me that healing isn't linear. Some days I felt powerful. Other days I still cried over the man who left. But slowly, the good days outnumbered the bad ones. And then came the moment I'll never forget. 18 months after Jason left, I walked into a Honda dealership with a check. Money I'd earned myself, saved dollar by dollar, design by design. The salesman tried to talk me into financing, but I shook my head. "Cash," I said, sliding the check across the desk. "I'm buying this car outright." I drove off the lot with Amara in her car seat, tears streaming down my face, blasting Beyoncé like I'd won the Super Bowl. That car wasn't just transportation. It was proof. Proof that I didn't need Jason's money. Proof that I could provide. Proof that I was building something real. Fast forward to today, 2 years after that humiliating night in my living room. I'm standing in my downtown Miami office. Yes, my office, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My calendar is booked 3 months out. My designs have been featured in Florida Home Garden magazine. I have a team of 2 assistants and a wait list longer than my arm. Amara's in a top-rated preschool, happy and thriving. We live in a beautiful townhouse that I designed myself. I wake up every morning not dreading the day, but excited for it. I rebuilt myself brick by brick. And honey, the foundation I laid? It's unshakable. Jason tried to break me. Instead, he freed me to become everything I was always meant to be. While I was building my empire one Instagram post at a time, Jason's kingdom was crumbling. Now, I didn't know this in real time. I'd blocked him on everything and honestly tried my best not to think about him. But later, after everything went down, I pieced together what his life looked like during those 2 years. Some of it came from mutual acquaintances. Some from his desperate confessions when he showed up at my door. Some from social media stalking. I'm not proud of, but won't apologize for either. Karma, it turns out, has perfect timing. For the first 6 months after Jason left me, he was living his best life. Or at least, that's what his Instagram showed. Him and Vanessa at rooftop bars. Vanessa draped over him at beach clubs. Champagne, luxury cars. The kind of photos that scream, "Look how happy I am," a little too loud. He'd moved into her upscale apartment in Brickell, all glass and chrome and city views. She played the doting girlfriend perfectly, at least in public. Made him feel like the king he thought he deserved to be. But fairy tales built on betrayal don't have happy endings. The real estate market started shifting around month 7. Nothing dramatic at first. Just deals taking longer to close, clients getting nervous, interest rates climbing. Jason, who'd been riding high on easy sales for years, suddenly had to work harder for less reward. His commissions dropped, first by 20%, then 30%, then half. "It's just a slow season," he told Vanessa, according to what he told me later. "It'll bounce back." It didn't. By month 10, Jason was scrambling. Deals were falling through left and right. Buyers were backing out. Luxury properties sat on the market for months with no bites. The career that had come so easily to him, the one he'd prioritized over his pregnant wife, was failing him. "And Vanessa?" she noticed. "You used to close deals in your sleep," she'd say, her tone shifting from supportive to accusatory. "What happened to the man I met at that gala?" What happened was reality. The confident, successful Jason she'd fallen for was built on a booming market and easy money. Take that away, and what was left? just a man with a shaky moral compass and mounting bills. Jason started gambling. First, it was just fantasy football with high stakes. Then poker nights that stretched until 3 a.m. Then actual casinos, convincing himself he could win back what the market had taken from him. He'd put 1,000 on red, lose it, and put another 1,000 on black, chasing the high of a win that rarely came. "I'm making strategic investments," he'd tell Vanessa when she questioned the missing money. But they both knew the truth. The stress changed him. The Jason who'd once been charming and smooth became irritable and paranoid. He'd snap at Vanessa over nothing, accuse her of texting other men, drink too much and say things he couldn't take back. And Vanessa? She started shopping for his replacement. Marcus just closed a $15 million deal, she'd mentioned casually, talking about some venture capitalist she'd met at a networking event. Derek's opening a third restaurant in South Beach. Javier just bought a yacht. Every name was a knife, every comparison a reminder that Jason was no longer the catch he used to be. Vanessa wasn't even subtle about it anymore. She was dangling other men in front of him, letting him know his time was running out. The breaking point came on a night Jason came home to find Vanessa dressed up, makeup perfect, wearing the dress he'd bought her with money he didn't have. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Out," she said, not even looking at him. "Marcus invited me to this charity gala. Major donors, important people." "I'm your boyfriend," Jason said, voice rising. Vanessa turned to him, and her expression was ice cold. "You were my boyfriend when you were somebody. Now, you're just someone taking up space in my apartment." That should have been his wake-up call. That should have been the moment he realized he'd traded a woman who loved him for a woman who loved what he could provide. But pride is a hell of a drug. Instead of leaving, Jason stayed, becoming more desperate to prove himself. He took out loans he couldn't afford, made risky investments with money he didn't have, borrowed from friends who stopped returning his calls, all to maintain the illusion that he was still that guy, the successful realtor with the hot girlfriend and the perfect life. But you can't fake it forever. By month 20, Jason was broke. Not just low on cash, actually broke. His bank account was in the negative. His credit cards were maxed out. He'd borrowed money from everyone who'd ever trusted him and burned every bridge in the process. And Vanessa, she'd been waiting for this moment. "I'm moving to New York," she announced one evening, casual as if she were talking about the weather. "Marcus offered me a position with his firm, better opportunities." Jason's stomach dropped. "What about us?" Vanessa laughed, not cruel, just genuinely amused. "There is no us, Jason. There never really was. You were fun when you had money. Now?" She looked him up and down like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "Now you're just sad." She packed her bags that night, but before she left, she did one final thing that crushed him completely. She'd had access to his accounts. He'd given her his banking information months ago during a moment of misguided trust. While he was at a failed listing appointment, she transferred what little he had left, $3,700. Everything. When Jason confronted her, she shrugged. "Consider it rent for all those months you stayed here. We're even now." And then she was gone. Off to New York, off to Marcus, off to her next victim. Jason stood in that empty apartment, Vanessa's apartment that he'd never actually belonged in, and felt the weight of every decision he'd made crash down on him. The eviction notice came 3 days later. He sat on the floor, back against the bare wall, holding that notice and shaking hands. No money, no home, no Vanessa, no career to speak of, no friends left who'd answer his calls. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through Instagram, torturing himself with other people's success. And then he saw it. My page. Monique Designs, you. There I was, glowing in my office, Amara on my hip, both of us smiling at the camera. The caption read, 2 years ago, I didn't know how I'd survive the week. Today, I signed my biggest client yet. Never let anyone convince you that your breaking point is your ending point. 20,000 likes. Hundreds of comments calling me inspirational. Jason stared at that photo for a long time. At the woman he'd called disgusting. At the child he'd never met. At the life he'd thrown away. And for the first time since he'd left, Jason Miller understood what he'd actually lost. It wasn't just a wife. It was everything. Rock Bottom has an address, and Jason's was a men's shelter on 7th Street. After the eviction, after Vanessa took everything, after his car got repossessed in a Walmart parking lot, Jason Miller, the man who once closed million-dollar deals in designer suits, was sleeping on a cot next to men who'd lost everything just like he had. The difference? Most of them had lost things beyond their control. Job markets, health crises, bad luck. Jason had lost everything because he chose to. The shelter had rules: be out by 7 a.m., back by 9 p.m., no drugs, no alcohol, no second chances if you broke the rules. Jason would lie awake at night listening to men snore and cry and talk in their sleep, wondering how his life had become unrecognizable. He'd tried getting his job back at the real estate firm. They wouldn't even let him pass the lobby. "We filled your position," the receptionist said. A new girl who didn't know him, didn't know he'd once been one of their top agents. "We're not hiring right now." He applied everywhere: other firms, property management companies, even retail positions at furniture stores, thinking maybe his sales experience would count for something. Nobody called back. His reputation had preceded him. Word spreads fast in Miami's real estate circles. The agent who abandoned his pregnant wife, the one who gambled away his commissions, the one Vanessa Rodriguez had dumped like trash. Nobody wanted that kind of mess on their team. So Jason spent his days walking the city, sitting in libraries for the free Wi-Fi, applying for jobs he'd never get, and doing the one thing he knew he shouldn't do, but couldn't stop doing. Stalking Monique's Instagram. He'd scroll through her feed like a man possessed, watching the life she'd built without him. Every post was a knife. Every smile was a reminder of what he'd thrown away. There she was, in her office, natural light streaming through windows, looking radiant in a cream-colored blazer. Caption? "Client meeting today. Blessed doesn't even cover it." There she was, with Amara, his daughter, a voice in his head whispered. Both of them laughing at a park. Amara had his eyes. He could see it even through the phone screen. There she was, at a gallery opening for a design showcase. Professional, poised, successful, everything he wasn't anymore. The comments killed him most. "You're such an inspiration. Single moms who build empires. Your ex must be sick watching you win." They didn't even know how right they were. Jason would sit on benches in parks he used to own, phone in hand, zooming in on photos like a detective looking for clues to a mystery he'd created. He'd study Monique's face, looking for signs of the broken woman he'd left behind. But she wasn't there. That woman was gone. This Monique was someone new, someone better, someone completely out of his reach. Late at night, when the shelter lights went out and he had nothing but his thoughts, the memories would attack him. Monique making him breakfast before big presentations, kissing his cheek and telling him she believed in him. Monique rubbing his shoulders after stressful days, never asking for anything in return. Monique's face when she told him she was pregnant, pure joy, expecting him to match it. The way she looked at him like he hung the moon, even when he didn't deserve it. He remembered smaller things, too. The way she'd hum while cooking, how she'd leave encouraging notes in his briefcase. The sound of her laugh before he made her stop laughing, her patience, her kindness, her unwavering belief that he was a good man. And he'd repaid all of that by mocking her body, cheating on her, and abandoning her when she needed him most. For what? For Vanessa, who'd discarded him the moment he stopped being useful. For an ego boost that lasted less than 2 years. For a life that looked good on Instagram but felt empty in reality. One afternoon, Jason broke down on a public bench in Bayfront Park. He'd been walking for hours, nowhere to go, nothing to do, when he just stopped, sat down, and started crying. Not quiet tears, full body-shaking sobs that made people walk faster past him, avoiding eye contact with the broken man on the bench. A kid, maybe 7 years old, stopped and stared at him. "Mommy," Why is that man crying? The mother pulled her child away quickly. Don't stare, baby. Jason watched them walk away, a mother protecting her child, the way Monique was probably protecting Amara from ever knowing what kind of man her father really was. He pulled out his phone again, opened Monique's Instagram, stared at a recent photo of her holding Amara, both of them wearing matching sundresses, both of them beaming. The caption read, "My whole world in one photo. We didn't come this far to only come this far. More blessings ahead." 23,000 likes. Jason's hand shook as reality crashed over him in waves. He'd mocked the belly that carried that beautiful child. He'd called disgusting the woman who now inspired thousands. He'd abandoned the only person who'd ever truly loved him, not for what he had, but for who he was. And now he had nothing. No career, no home, no dignity, no purpose. Everything he'd once mocked, Monique's pregnancy, her softness, her devotion, her quiet strength, those were the things he needed most now. The comfort she would have given, the support she would have offered, the grace she had in abundance. He thought of Vanessa's cold eyes when she left. Then he thought of Monique's warm ones, even in those final moments before he walked out. She would have fought for him. She would have stood by him through the market crash, the money problems, all of it. She would have been his partner, and he'd treated her like she was worthless. Jason sat on that bench until the sun started setting, until the park emptied, until security told him he had to leave. He walked back to the shelter in a daze, checked in, and lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling. He had one play left. One person who might show him mercy. It was a long shot. It was humiliating. It was probably what he deserved, but he had no other options. The next morning, Jason skipped the job search. Instead, he used his last few dollars to buy a bus pass. He showered at the shelter, put on the least wrinkled shirt he owned, and pulled up Monique's address, still saved in his phone from when it used to be his address too. She'd moved, he discovered. A nicer neighborhood. A townhouse with a small garden. Of course she had. She was thriving. Jason stood at the bus stop, watching route numbers flash on the screen, and felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Fear. Not fear of being rejected. He deserved that. Fear of seeing proof, in person, of just how completely he'd destroyed the best thing that ever happened to him. The bus pulled up. Jason climbed on, found a seat in the back, watched Miami pass by the window, the city where he'd once been somebody, now just the backdrop to his greatest failure. 40 minutes later, the bus stopped 3 blocks from Monique's new address. Jason stepped off, took a deep breath, and started walking toward the only person left who might remember him as human. He wasn't going there for forgiveness. He was going there because he literally had nowhere else to go. And maybe, just maybe, the woman whose life he'd shattered would show him more grace than he'd ever shown her. It was a Thursday evening, around 6 p.m., when I heard the knock. I was in the kitchen preparing Amara's favorite, spaghetti with the little star-shaped pasta she insisted tasted better than regular noodles. She was in the living room, sprawled on the rug with her coloring books, humming some song from her preschool. My home smelled like garlic and tomatoes. Soft jazz played from my speaker. The evening light came through my kitchen windows at just the right angle, hitting the sage green cabinets I'd installed myself. Everything was peaceful. Warm. Mine. The knock came again. Firmer this time. I wiped my hands on a towel, turned down the stove, and walked to the door. Probably a delivery I'd forgotten about, or maybe Mrs. Patterson from next door needing to borrow something. I opened the door, and time stopped. Jason Miller stood on my porch, and I almost didn't recognize him. This wasn't the man who'd walked out on me 2 years ago. That Jason had been polished, arrogant, put together. This Jason was a shell. His clothes hung off a frame that had lost at least 30 pounds. His face was hollow, unshaven. His eyes, God, his eyes looked like they'd seen things that broke him from the inside out. It was raining, and he was soaked through, standing there like he'd been working up the courage to knock for an hour. We stared at each other. Neither of us spoke. And then I heard her. "Mommy, who is it?" Amara appeared beside me, clutching her stuffed elephant, peeking around my legs with those big, curious eyes. Jason's face crumbled. He looked at her, really looked at her, and I watched something inside him shatter. His daughter, 2 years old, with his eyes and my smile and absolutely no idea who this strange wet man was. "Baby, go finish your coloring," I said softly, never taking my eyes off Jason. "Mommy will be there in a minute." "Okay?" She skipped away, completely unbothered. Jason's eyes followed her until she disappeared, then came back to me. His lips parted like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Just a choked sound that might have been her name. I should have slammed the door, should have told him to leave, should have protected my peace the way I'd learned to do in therapy, but I didn't. I stepped aside. "Come in," I said quietly. Jason hesitated, like he couldn't believe I was actually allowing him into my space. Then he stepped through the doorway, dripping rainwater onto my welcome mat, looking around like he'd entered a museum. And I guess in a way, he had. A museum of everything he'd lost. The home was nothing like the house we'd shared. That place had been his taste, his choices, his money. This was all me. Cream-colored walls with emerald green accents, plants everywhere, artwork I'd collected from local artists, furniture I'd chosen, arranged, and in some cases reupholstered myself. Every corner told a story of resilience. Jason stood in my foyer, water pooling at his feet, taking it all in. The gallery wall of Amara's milestones. First smile, first steps, first day of school. The built-in shelves I'd designed, filled with books and photos of a life he wasn't in. The kitchen visible beyond, modern and bright, and mine. "Monique," he whispered, and his voice cracked on my name. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, arms crossed. Not defensive, just observing, like I was watching a stranger, which in many ways he was. He started, then stopped. His hands shook. "I don't even know where to begin." "The beginning usually works," I said, my voice neutral. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the moment he registered how different I was. The woman standing in front of him wasn't the one he'd left crying on the bathroom floor. I stood taller. My eyes were clear. My energy was calm. I'd learned to carry myself like someone who knew her worth, and he could see it, all of it. "You look," he struggled for words. "You look incredible." I didn't respond, didn't smile, didn't give him anything. Jason's composure, what little he had left, completely broke. He dropped to his knees right there in my foyer, hands covering his face, and started sobbing. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. "I'm sorry," he choked out between gasps. "God, Monique, I'm so sorry. I lost everything. Vanessa left. My job is gone. I don't even have a place to sleep tonight. I have nothing. Nothing. And I know, I don't deserve to be here. I know I don't deserve your time or your mercy or even a conversation. But I didn't know where else to go." I watched him cry. Watched this man who'd once mocked me, betrayed me, abandoned me when I was at my most vulnerable. Part of me, a small, hurt part that therapy hadn't fully healed, felt satisfaction seeing him broken. But mostly, I just felt sad. Sad that it took losing everything for him to realize what he'd had. "Please," he begged, looking up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Please, I know I can't fix what I did. I know I destroyed us. But I need help. I need—" "You need me," I finished for him. He nodded, ashamed but desperate. I let the silence sit between us for a long moment. From the living room, I could hear Amara singing to herself, happy and unbothered. That sound, her joy, her peace, reminded me why I couldn't let this man's chaos back into our lives. "You want to know something?" I said finally, my voice steady. "I don't hate you, Jason. I did for a while. God knows I did. But hate takes energy, and I needed that energy to rebuild my life. I was wrong about everything, he said quickly, desperately. You were never the problem. You were beautiful. You are beautiful. I was stupid and selfish, and I threw away the best thing. Stop, I said, holding up a hand. He stopped. I walked closer to him, not to comfort, just to make sure he heard every word clearly. You didn't just leave me, I said, looking down at him, still kneeling on my floor. You left yourself. The man I married, the one who used to have integrity, who used to care about more than appearances, you abandoned him long before you walked out on me. Jason's face twisted in pain because he knew I was right. You chased something shiny and temporary, I continued, and it cost you everything real, your family, your character, your self-respect. Vanessa didn't destroy you, Jason. You destroyed yourself. She was just there to watch. I know, he whispered. I know that now. Do you? I asked. Or do you just know that you made a bad investment? Are you sorry for what you did? Or are you just sorry it didn't work out the way you planned? He opened his mouth, closed it, because he didn't have an answer that wouldn't prove my point. I took a breath, softening just slightly. I forgave you, I said, and his eyes widened in shock. Not for you, for me, because carrying that anger was like drinking poison and expecting you to die. But forgiveness doesn't mean going backward, Jason. It means I've made peace with what happened and moved forward. Can I? He started, voice breaking. Can I meet her? Amara? Can I? No, I said firmly. Not like this. Not when you're desperate and broken and looking for someone to save you. If you want to be in her life, you need to save yourself first. His shoulders sagged in defeat. I'll give you a meal and a number for a shelter that has good resources, I said. But I can't save you. Nobody can do that but you. Jason looked up at me, and for the first time, I think he truly understood. He hadn't just lost a wife. He'd lost himself, and only he could find his way back. I helped Jason up from the floor, not out of pity, but because I couldn't have a conversation with a grown man kneeling in my foyer. Sit, I said, gesturing to the couch. He sat like he was afraid the furniture might reject him. I went to check on Amara. She was still coloring, lost in her own little world, then returned to the living room. I didn't sit next to him. I took the chair across from the couch, the same way Dr. Morrison sat across from me in therapy. Distance, boundaries, clarity. Jason stared at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. Talk, I said simply. He took a shaky breath. I don't know where to start. Start with the truth. That's usually a good place. He nodded, and then the words came pouring out like a dam had broken. I was a coward, he said, voice raw. That's what it comes down to. When you got pregnant, when your body started changing, it scared me. Not because you weren't beautiful. You were, you are. But because it made everything real. The responsibility, the foreverness of it, and instead of growing up and dealing with it, I ran. I listened, my face neutral. Vanessa made it easy to run, he continued. She made me feel like I was still that guy, the one who could have anyone, do anything. She fed my ego, and I ate it up because it was easier than facing what I'd become. A selfish, shallow man who cared more about appearances than substance. Keep going, I said when he paused. The affair started small, just texts, just attention. But every time you needed me, every time you asked me to rub your feet or go to an appointment, I resented it. I resented you for needing me when I wanted to feel needed in a different way. Vanessa didn't need me. She wanted me. And I was too stupid to understand the difference. His voice cracked. When I left you that night, when I walked out with that note, I convinced myself I was doing us both a favor. That you'd be better off without me. That I deserved happiness too. But that was just me justifying being cruel. I felt something tighten in my chest but kept my voice steady. And Vanessa? Jason laughed bitterly. Vanessa never loved me. She loved what I represented. Status, money, access. The second those things disappeared, so did she. She didn't just leave. She robbed me on her way out. took everything I had left and moved on to someone richer without even looking back. Karma's funny like that, I said quietly. It's not karma, Jason said, finally looking at me. It's consequences. I destroyed a real relationship for a transactional one. I traded someone who loved me for someone who loved what I could provide. And when I couldn't provide anymore, he spread his hands. I was disposable. Silence filled the room except for Amara's soft humming in the background. The worst part, Jason continued, his voice breaking, is that I knew. Deep down, I knew what I was doing was wrong. Every time I came home late, every lie I told, every time I was cruel to you. I knew. But my ego wouldn't let me stop. And by the time I realized what I'd lost, it was too late. You're right, I said simply. It is too late. He flinched like I'd slapped him, but nodded. I know I don't get a second chance. I know I don't deserve one. But Monique, I need you to know, you were never the problem. You were never disgusting or too much or not enough. You were perfect, and I was too broken to see it. I let his words hang in the air for a moment. Then I spoke. You want to know what the hardest part was for me? I asked, my voice calm but firm. It wasn't the cheating, though that hurt like hell. It wasn't even the abandonment, though I thought that would kill me. The hardest part was believing I deserved it. Jason's eyes filled with tears. You made me feel like my body, the body that was creating life, was something shameful. You made me believe that needing support made me weak. You made me question everything about myself at a time when I should have felt most celebrated. I leaned forward slightly. Do you know what it's like to look in the mirror 8 months pregnant and hate what you see because the person who's supposed to love you most can't even stand to look at you? I'm so sorry. I'm not finished, I said, not unkindly but firmly. You need to hear this. He closed his mouth and nodded. After you left, I almost didn't survive it. Not physically, I'm strong, I made it through labor alone, but mentally. I almost let your rejection define me, almost let your cruelty convince me I was worthless. But then, Amara was born, and I realized something. I paused, making sure he was really listening. Your opinion of me was never the truth. It was just your truth, your insecurity, your fear, your immaturity, and I'd given it power over my life for too long. You didn't just survive, Jason said quietly. You thrived. Yes, I did. Not to spite you, though I won't lie. There were days that thought motivated me. But eventually, I did it for me, and for her. I glanced toward where Amara played. I built a life I'm proud of, a business I love, a home that feels peaceful. And I did it all without you. The words weren't meant to be cruel, but they landed like a hammer anyway. Jason absorbed them, and I watched the reality settle over him completely. He wasn't needed. He wasn't even wanted. He was simply irrelevant to the life I'd built. I know I can't fix this, he said after a long moment. I know I can't undo what I did. But is there any way, any chance, that someday I could be part of her life? Amara's life? I considered this carefully. Maybe, but not now. Not like this. You show up here broken, desperate, looking for a lifeline, and you think that's the version of you she needs to meet? He shook his head. If you want to be in her life, you need to become someone worth knowing. Get therapy. Get stable. Get honest with yourself about who you are and who you want to be. And then, maybe, we can talk about supervised visits. Supervised? The word stung him. You're a stranger to her, Jason, and until you prove otherwise, that's all you'll be. He nodded slowly, accepting the terms because he had no leverage to negotiate. I stood up. I'm going to make you a plate, and you can sleep on this couch tonight. Tomorrow morning you leave, and you start figuring out your life. Monique. This isn't charity, I interrupted, and it's not forgiveness in the way you want it to be. This is me choosing to be the kind of person who helps someone who's struggling, even when that someone hurt me deeply. But this is one night. After that, you're on your own. Jason's eyes watered. Thank you. I didn't respond. I just went to the kitchen and began preparing a plate. Leftover chicken, rice, vegetables, real food, the kind you make with care. As I worked, I felt Jason's eyes on me, watching me move through this space I'd created, this life I'd built. When I brought him the plate, he took it with shaking hands. You could have turned me away, he said quietly. Most people would have. I'm not most people, I replied, and I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because the woman I've become doesn't let other people's failures make her heartless. He ate slowly, like he was savoring not just the food, but the grace of the moment. And I realized something sitting there watching him. This wasn't about revenge or even justice. This was about closure. Not for him, for me. I needed to see him broken to understand that his opinion of me 2 years ago was worthless. I needed to offer him grace to prove to myself that I'd healed. I needed this conversation to close a chapter I'd already moved past. Jason finished eating and set the plate down carefully. The woman you've become, he said softly. She's remarkable. She always was, I replied. You just couldn't see her. And that, really, was all that needed to be said. Morning light filtered through my living room curtains, soft and golden, the kind of light that makes everything look like it's glowing from within. Jason stirred on the couch, disoriented for a moment before reality settled back on him. He sat up slowly, and that's when he saw her. Amara was sitting cross-legged on the floor in her pajamas, little pink ones with butterflies, completely absorbed in her drawing. She had crayons spread around her like a rainbow explosion, and she was humming that same tune from yesterday, tongue sticking out in concentration, the way children do when they're creating something important. Jason watched her with an expression I recognized from across the room where I stood in the kitchen doorway. Regret, wonder, grief for time he'd never get back. She looked up, noticed him staring, and tilted her head. "Why are you on our couch?" she asked with the blunt honesty only toddlers possess. Jason opened his mouth, but no words came out. "He's a friend who needed a place to stay," I said, walking into the room with a mug of coffee. "Baby, go wash your hands. Breakfast is almost ready." "Okay, Mommy." She bounced up, leaving her artwork behind, and skipped to the bathroom. I didn't offer Jason the coffee. I just sipped mine, watching him process the morning routine of a life that should have included him, but had learned to thrive without him. "She's incredible," he said quietly. "Yes, she is. She has my eyes." "She has her own eyes," I corrected gently but firmly. "They just happen to look like yours." He understood the distinction. I moved back to the kitchen, and Jason followed after a moment, hovering at the edge like he wasn't sure he was allowed. I was making pancakes, Amara's favorite, and the smell of vanilla and butter filled the space. This kitchen, this morning routine, this peace, I'd built it all from nothing, and it was beautiful. "Can I help?" Jason asked. "No," I said simply, not rudely, just honestly. "I've got it." He watched me work, flipping pancakes, cutting strawberries into little stars with a cookie cutter, pouring orange juice into Amara's special cup with the unicorn on it. Every movement was practiced, easy, full of love. This was my life. This was my normal, and he was just a visitor in it. Amara came running back, climbed into her booster seat at the table, and waited patiently while I set her plate down. She immediately started eating, telling me about the picture she was drawing. Something about a princess and a dragon who became friends. Jason sat at the table too, and I made him a plate. Not because he was special, but because it's what I would have done for anyone in my home. We ate in a strange quiet, Amara chattering, me responding to her, Jason watching both of us like we were a movie he was no longer part of. After breakfast, after Amara went back to her drawings, Jason cleared his throat. "Monique," he started, and I knew what was coming. "Is there any way? Could I maybe stay a few more days? Just until I figure things out? I could help around the house? Be useful? I could—" "No," I said gently, but the word was final. He deflated. "Right. Of course. I just thought, Jason, I turned to face him fully. My life is full now. Full of peace, full of purpose, full of love. There's no space for old wounds here, not yours or anyone else's. I'm not asking to get back together, he said quickly. I know that ship has sailed. I just need time to get back on my feet. And you'll get there, I interrupted. But not here. This home, this space, this peace. I fought too hard for it to let anything threaten it, even temporary. He looked around, at the plants, the photos, the carefully designed space that screamed stability and self-love, and finally understood. This wasn't cruelty, this was protection. Protection of everything I'd built from the ashes of what he'd burned down. I understand, he said, and for the first time, I think he actually did. I went to the kitchen and packed him a bag. Sandwiches, fruit, a bottle of water, granola bars, the same kind of care I'd show to anyone but nothing more. When I walked him to the door, Amara looked up from her drawing. "Bye, couch man," she called cheerfully, waving. Jason's eyes watered. "Bye, sweetheart." She'd already gone back to her drawing, unbothered, unaware of the weight of the moment. I opened the door and the morning air rushed in, fresh, full of possibility. I handed him the bag. "There's a community center 3 blocks east," I said. "They have resources, job listings, counseling services. Start there." Jason took the bag, holding it like it was more than just food, like it was proof that despite everything, he'd encountered grace he didn't deserve. "Monique," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. For everything. For this. For not—" "Don't thank me," I said, not unkindly. "Just do better. Be better. Not for me. For yourself." He nodded, stepped onto the porch, and turned back one more time. "I really am sorry. For all of it." "I know," I said. "But sorry doesn't change what happened. Only what you do next matters now." I started to close the door, then paused. "Jason, I forgave you a long time ago. Not because you deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I hope you find yours." And then I closed the door. Through the window, I watched him stand there for a moment on my porch, bag in hand, looking lost. Then he turned to walk away and stopped. Music was playing inside, a song Amara loved. And I'd scooped her up, spinning her around the living room, both of us laughing. She squealed in delight as I dipped her, her little arms wrapped around my neck, completely secure in the knowledge that her mother would never let her fall. Jason watched through the window, and I saw his face crumble one last time. He once laughed at this belly, made me feel ashamed of the body that was creating life, mocked me for being too much when all I was doing was growing his child. Now the life that came from that belly danced in the home he was never worthy of. I didn't dance for him to see. I danced because Amara asked me to, because the song was good, because joy was our normal now. But if he saw it, if he understood finally what he'd thrown away, then maybe that was the closure we both needed. He stood there watching for another minute, then turned and walked away. Down the path, out of my neighborhood, out of my life. I set Amara down and she ran back to her drawings. I walked to the window and watched Jason disappear around the corner, and I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no regret, just peace. You know what's wild about this whole story? I never set out to get revenge. Never schemed, or plotted, or tried to make him suffer. I just focused on surviving, then on healing, then on building. And somewhere along the way, I became someone he couldn't recognize. Not because I changed for him, but because I finally became fully myself. He thought leaving me would break me, thought I'd crumble without him, spend years begging him to come back, prove to him that I was enough. Instead, I carved a life so beautiful even he couldn't recognize it when he was standing in the middle of it. He mocked me, belittled me, abandoned me when I needed him most. But I freed myself. Freed myself from the belief that his love defined my worth. Freed myself from the prison of trying to be small enough for someone else's comfort. Freed myself from the idea that being chosen by someone meant I was valuable. I was always valuable, always enough, always worthy. I just needed him to leave so I could finally see it. They say living well is the best revenge, but that's not quite right. Living well isn't revenge at all. It's freedom. And honey, I've never felt more free in my life. Monique's design business continues to flourish. Amara grows up in a home filled with love, stability, and the knowledge that her mother is a warrior. Jason eventually gets back on his feet, but he never remarries, never has other children. He attends some of Amara's school events from a distance, always respectful of boundaries, always carrying the weight of what he lost. As for Monique, she never looks back. She's too busy dancing. The end. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.